air was rich with the scent of blooming lilies, and soft jazz floated in the background. The grand hall sparkled under crystal chandeliers, and every table shimmered with silverware, fresh roses, and wine glasses filled with laughter. Dignitaries from all over the country filled the room. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities, all gathered for one reason: to witness the union of Fred and Carlin. Carlin stood at the entrance, wearing a stunning off-shoulder ivory gown that hugged her tall frame. Her glowing dark skin looked like velvet under the soft lights. Her hair was elegantly styled, and her eyes shone with tears and joy. As she walked down the aisle, every step carried the weight of her past and the promise of a beautiful future. Carlin walked slowly down the aisle, escorted by Mr. Fei, the man who adopted her when her African mother died giving birth to her in Korea. Her steps were graceful, but her heart thundered. She wasn't just walking into a marriage. She was walking into the arms of a man who saw her, knew her, and never once tried to change her. Fred stood at the altar, his gray suit perfectly tailored, but it wasn't the designer cut that caught anyone's attention. It was the way he looked at her. His eyes were locked on Carlin, filled with awe, pride, and something more powerful than anything else: love. The children, Jiren and Lin, stood nearby in their little formal outfits, watching with wide eyes. For them, it wasn't just a wedding. It was their family becoming complete. Sitting at the fourth row of the grand hall, quietly tucked beside a column of peach-colored flowers, Faye and I held her sleeping baby in her arms and watched the ceremony unfold with misty eyes. A lot had happened in the previous months. After the truth unraveled, Fanny's divorce was swift. Public enough to make headlines, quiet enough to avoid a scandal, for Kim's company's sake. Fanny was now alone, 6 months pregnant, carrying a child whose father no longer wore a ring. To outsiders, she was still Mrs. Kim Ji, but inside the empty marital home, the illusion had long shattered. Kim Ji didn't abandon the child. No, he promised to take care of the baby. He paid for the best doctors, made sure she lacked nothing materially. But love, that was gone. His home no longer welcomed her. He treated her with courtesy, but not care. And Mrs. Faye, proud and entitled all her life, could no longer raise her head in the social circle she once ruled. The whispers were cruel. Her daughter? Divorced. Didn't you hear? She tricked her own sister. Fred is with Carlin now, the one they looked down on. The worst of it came the day she saw Fred and Carlin together, holding hands outside a children's hospital after a charity event. Carlin's head resting lightly on Fred's shoulder, the children giggling around them. Love didn't just glow from them, it wrapped around them like a promise. Fanny's mother froze in her car that day, unable to look away. "I should have treated her better," she whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "That girl was never meant to be beneath us." Guilt was eating them both alive. But the real turning point came when Faye and I went into early labor scare. She was rushed to the hospital, shaking, vulnerable, afraid. And the only person she could think of was Carlin. Later, heavily pregnant and emotionally wrecked, Faye and I stood in front of Carlin's modest apartment, eyes puffy, hands trembling. She rang the bell, and when Carlin opened the door, surprise filled her face. There was no smugness in Fanny, no arrogance, only defeat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Carlin didn't speak. She just stood, watching her. "I lied to you," Fanny went on, her voice cracking. "I destroyed something I didn't understand. I thought I was protecting what was mine, but I only lost everything." Carlin's arms stayed at her sides. "I don't expect your forgiveness, but I had to say it. I had to face what I did to you, to Fred, to myself." A long pause passed between them. Then, softly, Carlin said, "I forgave you a long time ago, but I didn't forget." Faye and I nodded slowly. "That's fair." And with that, she turned and walked away, back into a life she would now have to rebuild from scratch, this time without lies. It was a rainy afternoon when Faye and I gave birth to her baby, a healthy, beautiful girl. The hospital room was filled with the faint beeping of machines, the soft cries of the newborn, and the stillness of a woman who had been through emotional war. She held the baby close to her chest, eyes swollen from both exhaustion and silent tears. Kim Ji had been there during labor, keeping his word, but he'd left shortly after. The room felt too big now, too quiet. After her parents left, she never expected anyone else to come. So when the door opened gently and Carlin stepped inside holding a small bouquet, Fei Ni's heart froze. Carlin, in a simple dress, her expression calm but kind, walked toward the bed and placed the flowers on the side table. "Congratulations," she said softly. Fei and I stared, mouth slightly open, voice caught in her throat. "You came?" Carlin nodded, eyes falling on the baby. "She's beautiful. Looks just like you." Fei Ni's lips trembled. "Why would you come after everything I did to you?" Her voice was small, ashamed. Carlin took a breath, her gaze steady. "Because no one deserves to go through motherhood alone. And despite everything, you're still family." Something inside Fei Ni cracked. The emotions she had held back for months surged forward as hot tears filled her eyes. "I was so wrong," she whispered. "I hurt you. I envied you. And I told him your secret. I was selfish and cruel." Carlin walked closer, gently brushing her fingers over the baby's tiny hand. "And you've paid for it in your own way. I don't need to see you suffer. I just needed you to understand." Fei and I reached out, gripping Carlin's hand. "Thank you for coming. I never thought you'd show up, but you did." She choked, voice cracking. "You're stronger than I ever was. You have every reason to hate me, but you're here. I don't deserve that." Carlin squeezed her hand gently. Fei and I stared at her with eyes full of remorse. "You were always my sister, and I never acted like one. I see that now." Carlin didn't say anything, but the silence between them wasn't cold. It was soft, healing. For the first time in a long while, Fei and I wept not out of bitterness, but out of broken pride, rebirth, and a deep longing for the bond she had once thrown away. And for the first time, Carlin held no grudge in her heart, just peace. For Kim Ji, he apologized to Carlin. "I owe you an apology," he had said one evening at a rooftop restaurant, voice low and sincere. "Back then, even though our engagement was arranged, I still should have known better. I believed Fei and I, without asking for your side. That was wrong." Carlin said nothing at first, just listened as he continued. "I was young, foolish, and blind. And I'm sorry. Truly. You didn't deserve what happened." Carlin gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for saying that." It wasn't a long conversation, but it was enough. Enough to finally close an old wound. As for Carlin and Fred, their story wasn't one of perfection. In fact, it began with broken pieces. When Fred realized Carlin was the woman from that night, his search ended. But he didn't rush. Instead, he stayed slowly, deliberately. He showed up in small ways, earning trust not just from her, but from the 2 children she was raising alone. He listened. He laughed. He held her hand during storms. He never pitied her for her scars. He only admired her strength. At first, Carlin resisted. She had been hurt too deeply. Her past was messy, her trust shattered. But Fred had a way of gently rearranging her heart, piece by piece. He never pressured. He waited. When Lynn began to call him Daddy on her own, Carlin cried alone in her room. When Jiren finally offered a small smile and called him Daddy without spite, Fred didn't gloat. He just placed a hand on Jiren's shoulder and promised he'd always be there. Carlin saw a new world in Fred. A man who was fierce in boardrooms, but soft with her. A man who had enough money to buy a country, but chose instead to spend weekends painting with Lynn and arguing over games with Jiren. Now, sitting and watching the ceremony unfold, Fei Ni could see Fred at the altar, his eyes fixed on Carlin with a depth of love that made Fei Ni's chest ache, not with jealousy, but something else entirely. Something gentler, warmer, a feeling she hadn't expected to feel that day. Pride, happiness, peace. Despite everything, despite all the past, all the hurt, Fanny smiled. Not just because it was a beautiful wedding, but because Carlin looked genuinely happy. And Fred? He looked like a man who had finally found everything he had ever wanted. As the vows were spoken and the couple exchanged rings, Fanny clutched her baby a little tighter, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She didn't care if people were watching. She didn't care about whispers. She was just happy. She whispered to her daughter, "Your auntie is beautiful today, isn't she?" Then added softly, "She deserves this." Meanwhile, back home, Mrs. Fay sat alone in the quiet of her sitting room, clutching her phone tightly, but refusing to scroll through the pictures and clips her niece had sent her. She had been the one who encouraged Fanny to not accept Carlin as a sister, and now, the thought of showing up at the wedding, sitting among people who now saw Carlin as a bride to one of the most powerful men in the country, it was too much for her pride. "I can't go," she had told her husband earlier. "Let them laugh. Let them say I came crawling back. I won't give them the satisfaction." So she stayed home, trapped by her own shame, refusing to witness the one event that could have softened her heart. But Faye and I showed up, and that choice made all the difference. Because when Carlin later came down from the stage and gently hugged her, without bitterness or anger, Faye and I felt something shift deep within her. A soft, healing kind of forgiveness. And this time, she had no grievance left in her heart. Only love.